My name is Dinesh Priyankara, Data Platform MVP and Business Intelligence Architect. Let's talk about Azure Data Lake Analytics. Here are the things I'm going to cover with this video. I will take you through a set of slides that explain Azure Data Lake Analytics, its characteristics, and why we have been given it by Microsoft. Then I will talk a little bit on Hadoop and HD Insight for comparing them with Data Lake Analytics. Microsoft introduced a new language with the Data Lake Analytics that is called USQL. I will talk about basic of it, like key things to know, how to construct and how to leverage .NET, and how we can use USQL for processing our data sets. Then as usual, I will take you through two demos that show the way of using Data Lake Analytics. I talk about Azure Data Lake and Data Lake Store with my previous video. If you are new to Azure Data Lake and want to know about Data Lake and Data Lake Store, first watch this video. That will be really helpful for you for understanding Data Lake Analytics better. Okay, let's talk about Azure Data Lake Analytics. Let me take a slide from my previous video. This slide explains the key components of Azure Data Lake. So we have analytics and storage. In terms of analytics, we have we use two things. One is HD Insight, other one is Azure Data Lake Analytics, and that's what we discussed with this video. Okay, what is Azure Data Lake Analytics? Let's try to understand the first point because it explains the major part of it. So it says distributed analytical service, and it is based on Apache Yarn. So which means it's similar to Hadoop, because we know that Hadoop also uses Yarn for distributed processing. So what does it mean by distributed processing? Let's try to understand that too. In simple term, okay, think like this. You have a workload, a large amount of data, and you want to process them in a distributed manner for speeding up the process. So you have the instruction set for processing data, and all you want is get the data separated and process this separated data set with the instruction set you have, and then finally combine the result. This is distributed processing, and that's what we get from Azure Data Lake Analytics. If you know Hadoop, you know that you have to spend some considerable time on provisioning it. But still, we have been using either Hadoop in an open source platform or HD Insight in Azure. That's mainly for processing data. But Azure Data Lake Analytics simplifies this. We don't need to worry about provisioning clusters. We can simply make a job for processing our data set and submit it. Azure Data Lake Analytics takes care of the rest. So we don't need to think about how these clusters have to be created, how many nodes we need. No. So everything is taken care by Azure Data Lake Analytics. So you can see how useful it is. But remember, even though we compare this with Hadoop up to some extent, it doesn't mean that this completely replaces Hadoop ecosystem. When it comes to distributed environments, scalability is must. There shouldn't be a limit on scaling out. Azure Data Lake Analytics scales out as we instruct on demand. Not only that, we pay only for the duration of the query, not for anything else. So this is really good when it comes to the cost. Microsoft introduced a new language called USQL. It is not a new language for Microsoft, but it is a new language for us. This language is based on an internal language that Microsoft has been using for years. So the best part of it is SQL, and C# expression can be used within it. So we can consider it as a mixture of TSQL and C#.NET, and we know that most of us familiar with both. So this makes sure that we don't need to spend time on learning a new language for processing data or big data. How can I pass the instruction for processing my data? One way is using USQL, and there are some other ways too. So let's talk about USQL. So USQL can be written in Visual Studio, which is most familiar integrated development environment, and once it is written, you can submit it to Data Lake Analytics. So again, this makes sure that we don't need to use a new tool. We can continue with the tool we have been using for years. Since USQL can be used against many data sources, not against only data in the data lake store, one type of query can be used for getting data from many sources and then processing them in a combined manner. We'll be talking about this with another slide, but just remember, USQL can be used against many data sources. This supports many enterprise features like integration, security, compliance, role-based access control, auditing. So we can simply say it's enterprise grade. And finally, if your data is in Azure Data Lake Store, then you can expect a good performance because Data Lake Analytics is optimized for working with Azure Data Lake Store. So it's always better to bring data into Data Lake Store for processing data using Data Lake Analytics. But it doesn't mean that you need to have all your data in your Data Lake Store. Now you understand what is Azure Data Lake Analytics and why we should use it. Again, in simple term, if you have a large data set, either structured or unstructured, and want to process in distributed manner without spending time on provisioning data clusters, the best service available is Azure Data Lake Analytics. Since we made a few comparisons between Hadoop and Azure Data Lake Analytics with previous slides, let's try to understand the difference between not Hadoop and Azure Data Lake Analytics, but HD Insight and Data Lake Analytics. It's very important to understand because you need to decide what to be used with your project. First, Data Lake Analytics does not replace HD Insight, and HD Insight does not replace Data Lake Analytics. They are very complementary services. Azure offers HD Insight as a platform as a service, and Data Lake Analytics comes as a software as a service, or we can say big data queries as a service. As you know, if I have to process a data set, first of all, I have to configure the cluster with predefined nodes and then use a language like Hive or Pig for processing data. That's how we use HD Insight. But if I use Azure Data Lake Analytics, then it's all about passing the query written for processing data, and Azure Data Lake Analytics will create necessary compute nodes as per my instruction on demand and process the dataset. Once the processing is done, nodes used for processing will be no longer be available for my account. That's how it works. Since we configure the cluster with HD Insight, we can create as we want, we can control it as we want. Not only that, all Hadoop subprojects such as Spark, Swarm, Kafka can be used without any limitation. However, with Azure Data Lake Analytics, it does not give much flexibility in terms of provisioning the cluster, but Azure takes care about it. We don't need to worry about the cluster creation. Assignments of nodes will be done based on the instruction we pass. In addition to that, we can use USQL, taking advantages of .NET for processing data. You may see Hive as another language for processing data in future releases, as it is being planned by Microsoft. Let's talk about more on USQL. It's a new query language for data lake analytics, and it is for processing data, more precisely processing big data. As I mentioned before, it is not exactly a new language for Microsoft. It has been inherited from an internal language called Scope, used for processing large data sets. Since it's a mixture of SQL and C Sharp, we can write statement just like SQL statement. For an example, a select statement combining with C Sharp expressions. Not only that, we can write C Sharp functions either in code behind or in a different C Sharp class library and use them with statements. Uh, you will see an example with my demo. You can use USQL for processing both structured and unstructured data sets. For example, you can query a table in SQL database using USQL, that is structured dataset. Or you can process images stored in the data lake store with the support of image processing libraries. So that's how you process unstructured data using USQL. Schema on read. It is a concept we heavily use with big data processing. When there's a dataset without a predefined structure, we can define the structure as we want and read data using the defined structure. If someone else want to read the same dataset using a different structure, it can be done too. So USQL supports this. It allows to define the schema for reading without holding a dataset in a predefined permanent structure. I mentioned that USQL supports reading data from many sources. This gives us a great flexibility because this does not require prior data loading. Of course, it applies filters and joins directly to the source and loads data into Data Lake Analytics when it read. but it does not require data to be fully loaded in advance and maintained in data lake store. This makes sure that we use data from other sources for processing even though they are not stored in the data lake store. As you see, mentioned sources can be used for querying in, but only two sources, Azure Blob Storage and Azure Data Lake Store, supports write back. Let's try to understand how it processes data. We can submit USQL queries in many ways. However, we usually use either Azure Portal or Visual Studio. If you're going to use Visual Studio, you need to make sure that you have installed Azure Data Lake tools for Visual Studio. Query will be executed as a batch and units will be allocated to the query for parallel processing. We need to decide the number of units required for the query and pass it with the query. That's how you start executing your query. What are these units? Although units are not exactly nodes, concept is similar. Therefore, you can think it as setting number of units as setting number of nodes for the cluster for distributed processing or parallel processing. Query execution will have multiple stages like extraction, transformation, and writing outputs. Each stage has multiple vertices. Vertex is a single unit of work, something like reading data from one distribution or aggregating data from one result. Vertices can be executed parallel when there are multiple units. But remember, adding more and more units will not add more and more parallel work. It is based on the vertices you have for each stage. If the stage has only two vertices, think it as only two operations, even though you have assigned three units, only two will be used. So remember that part. Do not forget that you pay for units regardless of the usage of them. So make sure you assign only required AUs for the query. Let's take a USQL script and try to understand the key components or the main parts of USQL statements. This is not a code I have written. I have taken it from the web. If I'm not mistaken, it is from MSDN. But we can use this script for understanding a certain set of things related to USQL. First thing, declare statement. If you have used TSQL, you know that we use declare statement for declaring variables. So we can use declare statement in USQL for declaring variables too. So just like the TSQL, we can name our variables with @ sign. So you can see there are two variables in and out. But notice the data type. It is not virchar or it is not in virchar. It is string. So which means whenever you use data types with your USQL, you have to use C# data types. Okay, now see the search log variable. We can call it as a placeholder or we can call it as a row set. This is how we maintain temporary data sets. Just like SSIS, if you have used SSIS, you know that you have multiple tasks and each task processes certain set of data set and it keeps it, and then the next task uses the result set held by the previous task. Just like that, we use these row sets for holding data sets. So let's try to understand the statement related to this search log row set. We have used, or this statement has used a keyword called extract, which means we are simply commanding to extract data set from in variable. So in variable has a path which is search log tsv file. So we extract data from search log tsv file, but how it should be read? So extractors.tsv method explains how the file should be read. So simply we instruct to USQL engine saying get data from tsv file using tsv method. Okay, so how it should be read based on these columns, but it's a tsv file just like csv file. Okay, it has no predefined structure. So what we do here is we apply schema on read concept. We simply tell this guy saying I want to read data in search log file as user ID is my first column, and I want to read the second part as start column. I want to read the third part as region column. So that's how it has to be read. And again you see that we have to use C# data types, not TSQL data types. So this is how you apply schema on read concept for USQL scripts or processing data using USQL scripts. You might have noticed this question mark along with the data type. This is how you mark your columns as nullable. Duration is because what this statement says is we might get null values for duration, so this should be a nullable column. So how do you specify it? Int is the data type, question mark indicates it's a nullable column. Think about standard select statement. We have the standard select statement, select from where. Okay, so we simply say select from search log row set, but not all column, only start, region, duration. Again, not all rows, filter it for this region. As you see, this is a C# expression, so you just can't say region equal ENGB. You have to say region double equal ENGB. That's how you have to write expressions in USQL. So likewise, we have row sets RS1 and RS2. You can see initially we started search log row set. We get the data set based on schema on read. We get the data set into search log, and then we do some filtering using the second statement and assign that result set to RS1, and then we use RS1 as a source for forming RS2. With RS2 statement, again we have used a C# expression. You can see we have used a function related to C#, which is datetime.parse. So finally we have the result set in RS2 row set, and I can use output and outputters TSV for writing it back. Now where should it be written? You can see out variable has been used with output statement, and out variable has a value for the file path like output / result TSV. So when you execute this, it extract data and put it to search log, and then do some transformation with RS1 and RS2. Finally, RS2 will be written to a file called result TSV in the output folder. Couple of more things with USQL. If you want to register an assembly which has been written and compiled using C#, that can be done. So you can see an assembly called utilities DLL, which is stored in Azure Data Lake Store, has been registered with USQL script using create assembly statement. So once registered, you can reference it using reference assembly. Not only your own assembly, you can reference system assemblies too. Just like C#, you can create namespaces, and those namespaces can be used with your code. USQL allows you to create tables, these sort of manage table. We'll talk about manage and extend table with another slide, but just remember, it allows you to create a table or the manage table for holding data, and that can be reused. And you can see this statement uses a method coming from the assembly we have registered. Okay, and then it extracts certain set of data sets and place them in employees row set, and finally we use employees row set as the source for executing the last statement, which is an insert statement. So we insert all uh, form records or transform records to employees table. I'll make a separate video on USQL databases and talk about various objects, component related to USQL database, but let's go through some key points on it just to understand what is catalog and what are the things we can do with USQL databases. So USQL catalog helps you to store data in a structured way for reusing. It has a database called master, and it allows you to create your own databases too. Just like normal SQL databases, you can have tables, views, function, and procedures. If you have used something like Hive, then you know what are managed tables and external tables. Same concept. You can create tables to store data either in the master database or in your own database using managed tables. If you do not want to create a table like that, but still you need to refer a data set outside to Azure Data Lake Store as a table, and then you can create an external table. We'll talk about this in detail later. Time for demos. As the first demo, Let me show you how to read a file stored in Azure Data Lake 2 and apply small transformation, and then finally write the result set back to the store. And the second demo, I will show how to read multiple files in multiple folders, combine them, apply some transformation using complex expressions, and finally save the result set into Data Lake 2. Let's see. Okay, this is my Azure portal, and I have opened Data Lake Analytics Blade. As you see, I have already created an account, but let me show you how to create a new one. It's a very simple process. All we have to do is click on Add, enter the name, for example, USQL Azure Data Lake Analytics 01. If I see green tick, which means it is available and I can use it, then I can select the subscription, a resource group. Either I can create a new one or select an existing one. Let me select an existing one, select the location. Data Lakes 2, I can select an existing one. You can see there are two Data Lakes 2s available. I can select one, or else I can click on create new Data Lakes 2 and get a new one created specifically for this Data Lake Analytics account. Once the Data Lake store is selected or get a new one created, the next part is selecting the pricing package. If I'm not going to use this Data Lake Analytics account frequently, then pay as you go is best, or else I can go for monthly commitment. So once everything is set, all I have to do is click on create and get this account created. But I'm not going to create a new one since I have already created one. Let me close this and click on the one I have already created. It opens the overview tab. I can see many things related to my account, like how I've been using this, what are the succeeded jobs, how many have been failed. Everything can be seen with this page. In addition to that, we have couple of tabs given: new job, sample script, data explorer. I can use data explorer tab or this section for seeing the data lake store related to this account. You can see I have created many folders in this data lake store. Let me open one of the folders because I'm going to use one of the files in this folder for executing a USQL script. Let me click on CDR files. Uh, this folder contains CDR records, call related records related to one of the telco companies. So all the files have been organized in sort of folder structure, like start from the year, then all months related to that year, and then the dates. So if I click on date like 2, which mean 2017 December 2nd, I can see a CDR file. If I want to preview this, I can click on this and have a look on the data set. It doesn't load all records, but I can have a look. As you see, it has multiple columns. It is actually a CSV file, but based on the structure, we can see ID column, date related to the call, and the mobile number or the telephone number related to the person who initiated, a person who received the call, that's caller B, start time, end time, duration, and the seventh column or the eighth column, it is actually the cells that have been used, or cells in the towers that have been used for this call. And you can see there are multiple values in these cells. Like if you think about the first record, 917 is one cell, 562 is another cell, 126 and 924, all are these are the cells that have been used for this call. Okay, let's see how we can execute a simple USQL statement against these records. Let me close this. In order to execute a USQL job using Azure portal, what I have to do is click on new job. Let me give a name for this job, say read February CDRs, and I have already written the code, so let me paste that code. Let's try to understand what I have written. So I'm going to read CDR file in this location 2017-1202. That's a folder path, and this is how I want to read my record set. ID, date, column, everything is string. Even the cells have been or we are going to read cells as a string value. You know that cells column has multiple values, multiple cells, but let's continue with the string data type. uh, I'm going to use text methods for reading this file. uh, Comma has been added that indicates that the columns have been separated or delimited using comma. And in addition to that, I have added something like silent colon true, which means if something goes wrong or if there's an error, ignore it and continue. So that's the first part. So then we have a simple transformation. We are trying to get rid of the header, like if id or the first column, the value of the first column is equal to id, then do not include it. So we are reading cdr row set and then getting the result set into cdr records. And finally, cdr records will be written to a folder called cdr outputs, and the output file name will be cdrfeb.csv. Now, let me execute it. But before that, can you see this slider? Uh, how many AUs I want for executing this? Now, I know this is a very simple one. So I believe that one node is totally enough, but I can go up to 250 max. And I can see the cost for this too. If I increase number of AUs, I can see the cost is also getting executed. Now, for example, if I'm going to use 124 AUs for executing this query, I'll be paying $4 per minute. So that's how it goes. But I don't want to pay like that. Let me sticking to 1 AU and click on submit. Now this starts executing it. So it goes through multiple steps preparing. It's something like, database engine or SQL Server database engine preparing our statements, like going through it, creating a plan, something like that. Then if there are many uh, processes that have to be executed, it will be queued, and finally the execution will be started. And you see sort of a diagram or flow that shows us how this process is going on, how my USQL statement is getting executed. So the first part indicates the extractor part, and the second part it shows the processing part or the transformation we have added, and the last part it is for output. You can see this is getting executed, and our transformation is going through one vertex because it's a simple one. Okay, everything is done. I can go to my data lake store and see the file. uh, if I want to see more details to this job, for example, script that have been used, the data, both input and output, I can have a look on this blade too. But let me close this, and let me close this blade too, and I can click on Data Explorer. I can go to the folder which is CDR outputs and see whether my file is available. You can see CDR feb file has been created. I can click on it and I can have a look on it. So same set of records, only transformation we have done is remove headers. So this is how you execute a USQL job or USQL script using Azure portal. Now let's see how we can use Visual Studio for executing a USQL script with a couple of complex transformations. Here's the second USQL script. I have already created the Visual Studio project for this, but let me show you the way of creating USQL Visual Studio project. Now you need to make sure you have installed related SDK or the things we discussed with previous slides. If you have installed, when you go to File menu, New Project, you should see a new template called Azure Data Lake. And if you select Azure Data Lake, you can see project types. And in order to create a project for executing USQL script, what you have to select is USQL project. And then you can set a name, location, and solution name and all, and click OK for creating the project. That's how you do it. In addition to this project type, there's another project type called class library, USQL class library. If you want to create a class or C# class with set of methods and you want to use those methods with your USQL scripts, this is what you have to use. I have already created one, and I'll show you the way of using those methods with the USQL script. Let me cancel this and let me describe the code I have written. First statement is a reference statement. So I'm referencing an assembly which is called USQL class library. The class library has been already created, compiled and published. So where it has been published? It's in the master database. Let me go back to my portal. Here's my portal and this is my Azure Data Lake Analytics account. As you see, there's a node called catalog. When you open the Data Explorer, you can see the catalog node, and when you expand it, you can see the master database. This is where you create your own databases too, but I have not created my own databases, so I'm seeing only the master database. When I click on this for expanding it, just like a normal SQL Server database, I can see nodes for tables, views, functions, and procedures. Let me expand the assemblies node, and I can see set of assemblies that have been added. And this is the assembly I have added. So this has certain set of methods, and I'll be using a method available in this assembly with my USQL script. So how do I use it? I need to start with referencing the assembly. Let me go back to my Visual Studio project. So this is a statement for referencing that assembly, and I'll show you the way of using the method. So the next statement is the extraction. So just like the previous time, I have used extract statement for reading records from the CSV file, but last time we read only one file, but this time I'm reading all CSV files available in the folder structure. So you can see the way the path has been written: CDR files, and then the year, month, date, from date. That's how it has to be written, and all files or with the extension CSV. And everything will be extracted and placed in this CDR row set or the placeholder, and then CDR will be the source for the second statement. Now you can see with the previous statement, again we have read the cells as a string column, but with this second statement I'm using a C# method which is called split to split values in the cells, and then I'm converting the whole thing as an array. So what happened with the second statement is id, date, call a, b, start time, date time will be written with the result set. In addition to that, we'll be having an array as a column that contains all cells. Okay, so that's going to be my CDR detail 01 record set, and I'm creating another record set which is based on CDR detail 01, again taking date, caller A, caller B, start time, end time, and I'm calling a method called calculated duration which is available with my assembly. So this is how you refer it: your assembly, your class name, and the method and the parameter. So I'm simply passing start time, end time, and it will give the duration. It's a very simple calculation, but this is how you refer an assembly which has been added to either master database or your database, and use it with your USQL script. And last three columns, these three columns are based on the array we created with the previous statement. So since it is an array, I can just pass the index ID and get or read elements. So I'm reading the first element with this statement, and that's going to be the first cell that I've been used for this call. And then I'm reading the last element, so I can pass the index with this calculation, count -1, and that's going to be the last cell related to this call. And how many cells that have been used, simply calling the count method. So all these functions, the facilities are coming from C#. So the result set has been set as CDR detail 02. I'm creating another result set which is called cell usage based on the previous result set, CDR detail 01. Okay, and I'm using a method called explode for converting my cells or the array into multiple rows. So I have used cross apply for joining CDR data 01 with the result coming from the explode function, and then I'm grouping the whole result set by date, hour, and cell. Since we get multiple rows for each cell, I can simply get the count related to each cell. So what happened is this forms a result set that shows the date, hour, and the cell number, and how many times that cell has been used. That's the result set. And then finally, I have two outputs, one for saving the first result set. Uh, it will be saved as CDR details, and the second one is for storing the second result set, and it will be saved as cell usage. Let me execute, but before executing it, let me show you a few more things. Now you can see a couple of drop downs have been given with this script window. uh, if I click on the second drop down, I can see two options, local and my Azure Data Lake account. Now how this Azure Data Lake account has been loaded to this, because I have already connected to my Azure Data Lake within this Visual Studio. So how do you connect with your Azure Data Lake Analytics within Visual Studio? Go to View menu, open Cloud Explorer, and if you have not connected, click on this button for connecting it. Once you have connected with your Azure Data Lake Analytics, you can see it. If you expand this node, you can see it. In addition to that, you should see it with this drop down. So I can select my account and select the database. Now I don't have any other databases, so in that case master database has to be selected, and then I can execute this code. But before executing, I can simply click on submit, but before executing, let me expand this and click on advanced. So then it opens a dialog box that has a couple of properties. I can name my job as read CDR details, and I can increase number of AUs if I want, but let me stick it to 5, and let me click on submit. Just like the previous execution which we did through Azure portal, this goes through all these steps, preparing, queued, and then it is executing each and every stage. Okay, everything is done, execution is complete. You can see how it has been executed. Let's discuss how to analyze these jobs, how to analyze these stages, vertices, and how AUs have been used and all. We'll discuss them with another video. But let me go into my Azure Data Lake store and see how output files have been created. Let me click on Data Explorer, and let me go into CDR outputs folder. I can see two new files. One is CDR details, another one is cell usage. Let me click on CDR usage. So this is our first. This is based on our first transformation. I can see the date, uh, the first, the call ID, second call ID, start date or end time, duration, and then this is the first cell that have been used for this call. 351 is the last cell that have been used for this call, and for this call, two cells have been used. So everything has been perfectly transformed, and we can use this output for analyzing our calls further. Let me open the second result set, that is cell usage. So if I go to the first record, on this day, on 0 hour, 905 cell has been used 791 times. So by looking at this, I can understand what are the busiest cells and what are the cells that are not being used. So this is how you execute USQL scripts using Visual Studio with some sort of complex transformation, and create a new result set for further analysis. Okay, demo has been done. We discussed a few things related to data lake analytics, and let's see more with the next set of videos. Thanks for watching.